This is John from Programming Knowledge, and in this video guys, we're gonna talk about loops in C programming. So sometimes it is necessary for the program to execute the statement several times, and C loops execute a block of commands in a specified number of times until a condition is met. So in this video tutorial, you will learn about all the looping statements of C programming and along with their use. So as you can see, computer is the most suitable machine to perform repetitive tasks, and it can tirelessly do a task tens of thousands of times. Okay, and basically like every programming language has this particular feature to instruct to do such repetitive tasks with the help of certain form of statements. So that's why we have this loops. And then of course guys, in C, the C programming language supports like 3 types of loops. So we're going to discuss first while loops. Okay, so we have while loops, we have do while, and of course we also have the for loops. Okay, so we're going to dissect each type of loop so that we could better understand how it works and how we can use these loops in a certain situation. So basically guys, when we say loop, I'm just going to show you a simple flow chart. So we have here a simple flow chart that describes the nature of loop or loops in general. So we have like start, and then we can declare a counter or a variable counter, and then our program will try to evaluate the condition, and then if the condition is returns true, it could execute statements and then increment the counter, and then again evaluate the condition if the, like for example, the increment counter is equal or greater than something, and then execute statements, increment counter, and then evaluate condition, and lastly if the condition is met, then it will stop the execution of that particular loop. So basically guys, a loop is just doing or executing repetitive statements inside our C program. So there are like control statements, we have statements that we can use. So we have break, we can have like continue, and then of course we have the go to statement that we have discussed previously in our video tutorial series. Okay, so as I've said, we will discuss first the while loops in C programming. Okay, so C while loops statement allows to repeatedly run the same block of code until a condition is met. And of course, while loop is the most basic loop in C programming, and while loop has one condition, and it contains or it executes as long as the condition is true, and then the condition of the loop is tested before the body of the loop is executed. So the syntax for our while loop is like this. So we have the keyword while, and then a condition, so like a test expression, and then if this condition is like true, then it will try to execute the statements inside this particular while loop. Okay, now we can have a very simple application for this. So for example, we will try to implement this. Okay, so we can declare like a variable, so int n equals 1, and then times equals 5, and then of course we can declare the while loop for our program like this, and then open and close parentheses, and then we can say n is less than or equal to times. Okay, So we have to add the curly braces for that. And then inside these curly braces, these are the statements that will be executed if this particular condition is true. Okay? So it will try to print like C while loops, and then we can add the percent or percent %d, which is the format specifier for our int variable, and then we can display the n. Okay, and then of course we can increment the value of n by using the increment that we have discussed before, which is n plus plus. So basically this is just, you know, basically saying n equals n plus 1. Okay, I think we have already discussed that, the n plus plus increment, in our previous videos. Okay, now we have set the value n equals to 1. Okay, and then we have set the number of times the loop should be executed. So that's basically 5. There should be 5 execution, and then we added the while statement and then check the condition. If n is less than or equal to times, then execute these statements right here. So we can try to check this, build and run our application, and try to see the output of our program. And I'm going to, slowly explain to you what happens in this particular program. So you can see the output right here: C while loops 1, C while loops 2, and then 3, 4, and 5. And after 5, it no longer executed because it, ended the loop. Okay, so I'm going to explain to you how we got this output. So first thing, as I've said, we declare n equals to 1. So in this condition, 1 is less than or equal to 5, which is the value of times. So basically, and of course it is true that 1 is less than or equal to 5. So that's why it executed this particular statement, C while loops, and then it displays the value 1 right here. Okay? And then it incremented the value n. So now the n becomes 2. Okay? And then it will go here in our condition once again. So 2 is less than or equal to 5. So that's true because obviously 2 is less than or equal to 5. So that's it executes this statement right here, C while loops, and then the value of our n, which is 2. Again, it incremented the n variable, so the n now becomes 3. So after that one, we will go back here in the condition is 3 equals, or I mean less than or equal to 5. So that's true because 3 is equal to, or I mean less than to 5. So that's why it printed the output right here, C while loops, and then the value of our n equals to 3. And now, after that, it incremented another time the n, and the n becomes 4 now, and it go back to the condition is 4 less than 5. So basically 4 is less than 5, obviously. So that's why it printed out the C while loops and then 4, the value of our n. And again, incremented, added 1 to the n variable, and then the n now becomes 5, and then go back here in the condition is 5 less than or equal to 5. So it returned true again because 5 is equal to 5. So it printed out C while loops and then the value of our n, which is 5. Now, it incremented another time the n variable, and now the n variable becomes 6, and it will go directly here in our condition is 6 less than or equal to 5? So it returns false because 6 is not less than or not even equal to 5. That's why it ended the loop and it never executed the uh, this particular statements right here once again, because 6 is not less than or equal to 5, which is the value of our times variable. We're going to discuss another type of loop, which is the do while. So from the previous tutorial, we already have discussed the while loop, okay, and then we implemented a simple iteration program where we could see the value of the variable each of the iteration of our while loop. Now the difference between while loop and do while is that the while loop will try to evaluate first the condition, and then if this condition is returned true, then it will execute the statement inside this particular while loop. Whereas when we are trying to use the do while loop, then the statements inside the loop will execute at least once before the condition is being evaluated. So the syntax for that is like this. We'll just remove this for now, all these lines of the while loop from the previous tutorial. Okay, so this is the format or basic format of the do while statement or do while loop in C. So basically we have the do keyword and then open and close curly braces and then the statements or group of statements. Okay, now after the curly braces, then it will have the while keyword and then open and close parenthesis with the condition inside it. So as I've said earlier, guys, that this particular loop will try to execute at least once before the condition is being evaluated. Okay, so as you can see, if you wanna like execute first some statements before you could evaluate the condition, so the do while loop is the way to go. So we will try to create another program, guys, showcasing how this particular do while statement or do while loop looks like or how it works. So basically, guys, we could um, initialize some variables here. So for example, the n. So int n equals 1. And then we could also declare another variable, which is times. So basically what we are doing here, or what we're declaring here, is two variables for our do while, and the n represents the number, or I mean the value of the iteration or the value of the variable each iteration, and then of course the times is the number of times the loop should execute. Okay, now inside our do while or do statement, we could add a printf statement here, and then could say C do while loops, and then the format specifier %d \n, and of course the n variable. Okay, so we have this printf statement. So basically what we're trying here is we're trying to display the value of n every execution of this particular statements. Okay, and in here below this printf statement, we could increment the n by using this statement n equals n plus 1, or you could simply use the n plus plus version of this particular statement. So n equals n plus 1. So again, every iteration we would try to increment the value of our n plus 1, and then inside here the while and then open close parenthesis, we could add the condition. So for our condition, you could add the n and then less than or equal to the number of times we want this while loop or do while to be, executed. Okay, so I think that's all for this do while statement. So we could try to run our program and then build and run and see how this particular program works. Okay, so basically guys, I will try to explain it to you how this or how we got this um, output. So from the initial value of our n, we have uh, executed the do statement right here. So we printed out like the value is c do while loops, then %t, and then the value of our n is 1. Okay, so after this iteration, we increment the value of our n by 1. So that's n equals n plus 2. Okay, or I mean 1, n plus 1, and then the semicolon. And then, of course, we will try to evaluate this in our condition. So 2 is less than or equal to times, which is 5. So, of course, 2 is less than 5. So that makes sense. And then it will try to execute the statements inside the this curly braces. Okay. Then printf c do while loops, and then of course it will try to output the value 2. Okay, after this the n will be incremented again by 1, so n equals n plus 1. So the value now, or the n value now, becomes 3, and then evaluate it in our open and close parentheses. So 3 less than or equal to 5. So obviously 3 is less than 5. So it will try to implement or execute again the statement inside our curly braces, and then display 3. This will be the line 3. And then of course it will increment again the value n, and the n becomes 4 now, and then evaluated once again is 4 less than or equal to 5. So basically 4 is less than 5. So it will execute the statement printf again, display the value 4, and then increment again the n. It becomes 5, and then after that it will try to evaluate the statement is less, or n is less than equal to 5. So we have set now the value to 5, so 5 is equal to 5. So it will try to execute the statement once again, and the 5 value now becomes, or the n value now becomes 6, because we try to increment it here. So 6 will be evaluated inside our while statement. Then 6 is less than or equal to 5. So that's basically not true, because of course obviously 6 cannot be less than or cannot even be equal to 5. So that's why it will try to end the loop, because the condition returns false already. Okay, so that's how the do while statement works. And guys, make sure that there's like a finite end of your loop, because there are cases that the condition will not be evaluated into false at some point in our program, so that will make it like the infinite loop. So the concept of infinite loop. So be careful to place a condition here that will try to, or like will be evaluated false at some point in our program, because you don't want to have the infinite loop, because the program will run infinitely, and you don't want that. It would consume the memory of your computer. So that's why you need to be careful with the infinite loop. So make sure again to add a condition that will be evaluated as false at some point in your program. Guys, we're going to discuss another type of loop, which is for loop. So from the previous tutorials, we have discussed already what is while loop, what is do while, and how it can be used in our C programming or C programs. So as I've said, guys, in this video we're going to discuss for loops, and of course we're going to describe the syntax of for loops. Okay, so the syntax for loops, guys, is like this. I'm going to copy and paste this here. So we have here the for keyword, and then we have the open and close parenthesis, in which we can, there are like three statements that are available for us. So the first one is the init or initialize, and then the second statement is the condition, and the third one is increment, or it could be also decrement. Okay, so these three statements inside this open and close parenthesis is separated by semicolon. Okay, and of course, guys, each of this statement plays a big role in our for loop. Okay, now we can try to implement our very simple for loop. So for example, let's declare a variable for our for loop. Inside the initialize statement, we could initialize a variable right here, like for example int x equals 0. So we could do that here. We could initialize our variable into something like 0, or it could be 1 if you want to start 1. So basically, guys, it is the same as declaring the variable here. So int x 0. So you could also do that here. Initialize the value to x. So this two is just the same. So basically, we're just declaring the variable and setting the initial value, say for example 0 or 1. Now the second statement for this particular for loop, we could add the condition. So the condition is something like this. We could check if the x variable is less than or equal to 5, just like what we have from the while loop and do while loop. So we're checking if the value of the variable is less than or equal to 5. And of course, the last part or the last statement for this particular open and close parenthesis for loop, you could add the increment, or it could be the decrement depending on the initialize the condition, of course, in your for loop. So for example, we want for now is to increment. So you could actually do this like this: x equals x plus 1 inside the for loop. And then of course, guys, the statements inside the curly braces. So the statements, you could execute statements right here. So for example, printf the value of x colon, and then the format specifier %d \n to have a new line, then specify our variable x, and then end this off with a semicolon, just like this. So guys, basically what we're trying is to display the value of the variable x each iteration of this particular loop. So we could build and run this application and see how it works. Now we have this output. The value is 1, the value is 2, the value is 3, the value is 4, and 5. So guys, I'm going to explain to you how we come up with this output. So at first, guys, we declare the variable x and initialize the value into 1. So now the value for our x is 1. Okay, so value of our x is 1. 1. Okay, and then let me write first is equal, or x is equal or less than or equal to 5, and then increment. Okay, so for example, at the first iteration of this for loop, we have initialized the value into 1, or the value of x into 1, and then we try to evaluate the statement is x is less than or equal to 5. So of course x is less than 5, since the value of x equals to 5, so this returns true. Then it will execute the statement, the value of x, it should be x right there, is 1. Okay, and then after this, after execution of this particular statement, it will increment the value of our x. So at the second iteration, it will be 2. Okay, so of course 2 is less than 5, so that's basically the condition will return true, and then of course it will display the value of x is 2, and then another iteration 3, so 3 is less than or equal to 5, right? And obviously the 3 is less than to 5, so basically it will return true, and then display this statement, and until the x will become 6. Okay, 6, and then it will evaluate is 6 less than or equal to 5. So basically this is false, and then it will terminate the loop, or it will end the loop itself. So that's how we got this output. The value is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So this particular output, guys, is incremented. So the value of our x is increment, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But anyway, guys, we could, make it like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we will initialize our variable x differently. So for example, let's try to revise our for loop, and we will start from 5. Okay, so the initial value of our x is equal to 5. And of course, we will check if, so for example, is x is greater than or equal to 1. So now we're doing the reverse of the increment. And of course, guys, you can, add the increment statement just like this, x equals to x minus 1. And of course, you can use the post increment that we have discussed from earlier videos in this particular series. So you could do it like this, x minus minus, and then we could, display the value of our x. Okay, so let's try this once again and build and run our application, and of course we're going to get the reverse output. Okay, so we have here the initial value 5, and then 4, and then 3, and then 2, and then 1. Okay, so guys, of course you can always try to, add another for loop inside this loop. So as what we have from the previous tutorials, we have like the nested if and else statement. And of course, guys, you could also have nested for loops or nested while loops in your program. So for example, like this, you could, add another for loop here. So for example, int y is, we will set the initial value to 1. Okay, initial value into 1, and then we could try to evaluate the statement. So for example, is y less than or equal to x, something like this. And then we could add the increment y plus plus, okay, and then open and close curly braces, and then of course we could display the value of our x and y. So the value of x, for example, %d, and value of y is something like this. The value of x is %d, and then the value of y is %d again. Okay, and then we could also specify the value of our y. Okay, so we could, build and run our application, and of course we will get this particular output. So the value of x from initial value of our x is 5, right? So it will try to run 5 times, and then it will try to display 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 for our value of our y. Okay, and then of course we have the 4, and then we also have 3, and then we also have 1 and 2 and 1. So you could do that, guys. As I've said, you can do nested for loops or nested loops in your C program. So you could increment, you could use decrement inside your loops. Okay, so, and guys, if you want to practice more about using loops, you could, try to print different patterns. If for example you want to print a rectangle or triangle, you could display inverted triangle by using the asterisk symbol. So you could do that by using your loops. Okay, so I think that's all there is to it, guys, for this tutorial, and I hope you learned something. And if you have questions, as always, you can ask questions in the comment box below. So thank you for watching, guys, and see you in the next video.